Politicians gathered at the BC legislature, an election next year, and Trans Day of Remembrance being observed. What better time to question our elected officials about what the rise in violence against trans, non-binary, and gender-diverse individuals means to them, and what they will do to protect and support us if we give them our vote.
We know the way we look at it, this is the last T-door for this government term, right? But who knows what's next.
It's a really important day. I think it's a day for me and everybody to reflect on not only the struggle that people have had, but also human rights and what it means, and what it means to have a province that respects everybody equally and gives everybody the right to have a life of their own choosing and protect it. And so I'm thinking about that a lot lately, actually, especially with the rise of hate that we've seen in our province. I think it's having a big toll on people.
When you're thinking about what you and your party want to do for trans people moving forward, what is a good reason for trans people to vote for you, for your party? What are you hoping to accomplish to make lives better for trans, non-binary, and gender-diverse people?
It's not me that has the answer to that, it's the community. I think there's always got to be a dialogue directly with what the gaps are, and what I'm hearing from people lately is the rise of hate and the rise of incidents on the street. And that's really concerning to me, especially somebody in my position. What can we do to stop that? I'll get to the policies and things we have to do to invest in, but at the beginning, I think there's something for a rule of government to stand up against it. Whether it's standing up for SOGI in schools, whether it's making sure that the healthcare system is responding in a good way, and we work to do on that, making sure that our how we ask for identity is reflective of the diversity. Once somebody like me makes a decision and we don't have the data, we don't know how is it affecting different groups in our society, then we make the decision blind, right? So if we are gonna properly collect what we're doing and understand the differences, then the decisions become clear, right? And then also against community groups, the advocacy that they need to say, right, this is what this program is doing and this is what the data shows. And I think law has a big role to play in that, right? How we invest in our human rights tribunal, how we make sure that we'll have the ability to seek justice when things happen to them, and make it clear that this is against the laws of this country.
So you talk about implementing laws and trying to combat hatred, but there's also this discomfort that trans and non-binary and gender-diverse people have around police. So how do we enforce laws? How do we make sure that we are combating that hate without using this tool that is going to potentially make the situation even worse?
Who do you feel safe going to and asking for that help? And is that resource something that actually has helped you in the past? Building that trust. Yeah, I think that's really important. Right now, the BC Prosecution Service, for example, is in the field trying to update their hate crimes policy, but also the federal government in terms of what is a hate crime and how do you get best practices for people to identify it? Mm-hmm. We have lots of work to do on that.
When we get to that concept of ongoing consultation with the community, because I did sit in the Regional Transcare BC Recommendations Committee, right? I sat in that room. I know what the agreements were. And the agreements were that the community was supposed to have a role in the program. We were supposed to have the role of doing the community service, distribution and management of it, so that we were at the tables in the system taking care of it. We had to have a part that actually the system needed to function so that we were recognized as a stakeholder. Never happened, right? Okay. And we've been asking since, which is now 8 years, could we just have the structure that's in the business plan? Everybody has gender as part of their identity, and we need to speak about gender wellness for everybody, right? Everybody, how do you take care of your sense of gender, right? And we just do it a different way. But if we can reframe the conversation that it's just a normal part of all people, it's just different in people, then I think that would be one of the ways forward.
That's a great concept, gender wellness. As you're talking, I'm trying to think what that means to me. I think that's a really interesting question.
In the 10 years since my social transition, I feel more ill at ease being in British Columbia than I ever have before. How did we get here, right? We've put so much effort into this. It doesn't seem to be going the right way, you know what I mean? And leaning in on the
average than you ever have before?
I do. Yeah, I'm more concerned about public safety. So we have Nicola, right? She can take it, right? But as a woman in politics, people fall in your home, just incessant hate. All that stuff that comes out, right? We just get it, 2 or 3 times, the same thing. But
the BC Green Party attempted to make themselves available to us. However, they ended up being held up in debate. Fortunately, they sent over this footage.
For me personally, the Trans Day of Remembrance is an important day for us to reflect on the harm that trans people experience in British Columbia, in our communities. I reflect on the people I know, my friends and community members who are trans, and the stories they have shared with me about the hate and the discrimination that they have experienced as trans people. The human rights of the LGBTQ2S+ community have been hard-won over generations. And right now, those rights are under assault. We have to do everything we can to protect and improve the human rights for all people, including trans people. And we have to reject the hate that is being directed at trans people right now. We will continue to stand for the human rights that have been hard.
I'm going to move an amendment 109.1. This amendment replaces some basic gendered language in the bill, just removing he or she and replacing it with they. There's no reason why we move the Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Act here today and not have this change of language to reflect the kind of language that we're using today. And I hope that this is just like an oversight that we didn't do this now that it was open. I think it's a reasonable request, and I hope that government supports it. Thank you.
Transgender Day of Remembrance on November 20th holds a profound significance as we gather to honor the lives of transgender individuals who tragically fell victim to violence and discrimination. There's so much violence and so many people have lost their lives just for being the people that they are. It is important for us to think about that and to remember that there are being trailblazers who've put their life at risk. And it hasn't gone away. There's still people that just, just for being who you are, you deal with discrimination, but you also deal with physical threats, violence, and it's important that communities understand that.
Knowing that there's an election coming up next year and the next Trans Day of Remembrance could be under your government, it could be under another party's government, what are you and your party planning on doing to make sure that you're supporting trans, non-binary, and gender-diverse people?
I think it's important to work with the community to understand what the issues are and what are the areas that we really need to focus on. We really believe in anti-bullying programs in schools, making sure that children feel safe, that they have somewhere to go, looking at and working with the community on how do we keep people safe and how do we make sure that we're not using the wrong words and we're not providing information in the community that's misleading and is not inclusive of really understanding what it's like to be trans, what a child goes through, the challenges that you have with healthcare. So it's important that we understand, but it's also important that we really help to get rid of the stigma and take away some of the misunderstanding.
My social transition was at 58. At 58, I was a senior construction executive building luxury hotels in California. A year later, I was living on my life savings, right? So the majority of gender diverse people in BC are over the age of 40, but there's no program delivery at all for us.
Right.
So there'd be things like they probably are already in committed relationships, right? And those relationships need a lot of help to persist through that kind of change, right? All those things are sort of lacking because, again, the older voice of the community has been kind of disregarded.
Right.
Because what we see is like after going through that sort of intensive change focus, sometimes there's a depression period, right? Because it's like, okay, wait, I'm still trans, right? I mean, like, what happened? You know what I mean? Sort of thing, right? Because there's not any sort of secondary support related to it. Trying to get evidence-based to like policy.
It's hard.
It is, right? You would think that government is always, operating from an evidence process, but they don't, right?
No, they don't.
They're too pressed, right? They're too pressed to get things done. And we're not saying we have the answers to any of these things, right? But we do know that if you get a group of people together in an organized format so they can represent themselves as stakeholders, the answers will come out.
Yes,
right?
and I'd like to take a moment to also just thank Nicola, Chris, and Michaela for their advocacy from Divine for supporting trans people and community and taking the time to be here today with government members and MLAs to talk about the importance of this. Yet it remains disheartening that the journey towards equality for transgender people is riddled with formidable challenges. From employment and education to healthcare and housing, transgender individuals grapple with pervasive discrimination and stigma every day. This insidious prejudice not only leads to exclusion, but also hampers their access to essential opportunities. The struggle amplifies when considering the disproportionate violence experienced by transgender people, especially transgender women of color. The prevalence of physical and sexual assaults highlights the pressing need to address hate crimes targeting transgender individuals. The consequences extend beyond the physical, as depression and anxiety tragically plague this community.
Today is for the mourning the loss of so many who have been attacked, injured, or murdered because of transphobic violence. Lost far too soon due to homophobia, transphobia, racism, and historic and persistent colonialism. While we have taken steps towards building a more inclusive British Columbia together, there is much more work to do. I would like to start by asking Mayor Marianne Alto to join us.
The city, of course, is always honored to be involved in recognizing our striving towards more equality for everyone in our community. We consider everyone who's here in Victoria to be Victorians, all part of our family, including trans folks and all the allies who work to make all of our lives safer. We actually did proceed with approving a proclamation noting this day, and it's my pleasure today to present it.
My name is Kelly Paddon. I am BC's Parliamentary Secretary for Gender Equity. I practiced this a lot of times so that I wouldn't tear up. I didn't practice enough. Each of these lives lost were precious. They are precious, people who should still be with us here today. I know, as all of you know, that we have seen a rise in threats and violence against trans people. For anyone who may be feeling concerned or unsafe, please know that you are not alone. You have support, and you have people who are in your corner. On behalf of the government, we recommit to ending transphobia and supporting members of the trans community. In fact, just last week, BC announced a new anti-hate community support fund to help organizations respond to the deeply troubling acts of hate in our province. We've also worked to make it easier for people to change their gender designation on government identification, to ensure gender-affirming healthcare is available, and in the months ahead, we will work to engage with transgender and gender-diverse people on further measures that we can take. We were the first BC government to raise the transgender flag on a legislature lawn, and we do so again today in honor of those that we've lost.
I'd now like to invite up Nicola Spurling, joining us from QMUNITY's Board of Directors.
Trans people, and particularly trans women of color, face disproportionate levels of violence and harm, not only around the world, but right here in British Columbia. We see it in our work, we see it around us in our community, in our friends and family members. The statistics are not just numbers, they represent lives cut short and dreams unrealized. In recent months, we've witnessed a sharp rise in discrimination and violence against trans individuals across all age groups in British Columbia. Fueled by misinformation and ignorance, the lives of trans people are frequently exploited as political pawns in debates. Trans and gender diverse people have always existed. We deserve the right to be free from harm and discrimination. Trans people deserve access to healthcare, sports, washrooms, and the ability to live our lives free from oppression. Trans people deserve more than just words. We deserve action. At QMUNITY, we know that transphobia and transmisogyny are a product of colonization. The struggles faced by our community demand urgent attention, and we need increased funding to fortify our mental health services, ensuring every individual at QMUNITY receives the support that they deserve.
I'd like to invite Dr. Devor, Chair of Transgender Studies at UVIC, to say a few words.
The people we remember today, largely trans women of color, were just trying to live their lives and get by in a world that had little room for them. Their lives are brutally taken, their last moments were suffered only because they didn't do their gender the way that someone else thought that they should.
We recognize a lot of days all throughout the year where we do education, where we do advocacy, where we try and bring light to different identities within the community. I think Trans Day of Remembrance is very tangible in highlighting the very real experience of people within the community. I don't think there's any group or people within the queer community at large that experience harm, violence, and discrimination at the rate and the scale that trans, non-binary, and gender diverse people do. So QMUNITY is a two-spirit trans queer resource center, and so we offer mental health resources primarily. Queer trans youth are able to access drop-in spaces to be with peers and friends, to literally play games and make art and be themselves and be celebrated. We also have a seniors program on the other spectrum of that for folks that are aging in our communities. We have our counseling program that uniquely delivers counseling from the lens of clinically supervised counselors who have lived experience. And then in between all of that, we've got got peer groups. We have a network of almost 17 peer groups all throughout the province that bring people together so that they can connect, so they can help each other out, so they can bond over shared experiences. We have a volunteer program. We have an employment program to help folks overcome barriers to employment. Oftentimes we talk about trans-specific programs. And I mean, we do have a trans ID clinic for anyone that needs pro bono support in changing gender markers and names on their IDs. And we have Trans Gathering and Trans Medical, which are specific peer groups for trans folk to get connected to each other and access resources. There's no program at Community that doesn't weave the trans community into its support, right? Like everything that we do at Community is designed so as to support anyone within the community that needs help. And that includes gender diverse, two-spirit trans people in a massive way.
My name is Salazar. I am with PFLAG Vancouver. The folks that have been coming and gathering for support are the parents who've come in and they don't know what to do because they have a child or loved one who's come out to them as trans, and in the last 5 years, more and more as non-binary. And so we are there to share our lived experience. And so parents who've already gone through this processing of their child or their loved one coming out as trans, that initially was frightening and very confusing. And as they have educated themselves and have spoken to other parents, have been able to move beyond that and now sometimes come back to share their experience with those who are navigating these uncharted waters for the first time. 2010 was the first time I attended TDOR events in Vancouver. And I had no idea that this event existed, number one. Number two, I was just beginning to also navigate my own life. My career as a freelance graphic designer came to an end shortly after, and I found myself virtually unemployed. And it was difficult to find new clients or to get hired for projects, even though Vancouver is a very safe place. When it comes to business, things are seen through a very narrow lens. The hope is that people will open their eyes and just realize that we're just trying to live our own personal lives. And we have hopes and dreams just like everybody else.
After mailing packages of letters and resource directories to every MLA in BC, it was time to have a panel discussion contrasting the experience of trans elders and trans youth. Full video on the Divine YouTube channel.
I'm 83 years old, by the way, and I transitioned hormonally. I won't go into the whole detail, but initially in 1970 and then surgically in 1972. And I'm really pleased that you're having this intergenerational dialogue.
I'm a teacher and an artist and a facilitator, a community organizer. I've been involved with the organizing of the Trans Swim in Vancouver.
They chose not to be out, and many choose not to be out today. I see why. I see the fear. I know the fear.
I feel like when I was growing up there also, it wasn't really a visibility around trans men.
So we've had a history within the professional community of seeing us as sick somehow.
While the change that we're seeing is not linear, I do have hope that we will get to a place where we're working towards liberating ourselves and each other together.
Do you think that different generations of trans people do a good job of listening to and supporting each other?
Frankly, no. I do know that many people are beginning to make that effort. You know, like this is an effort. I have more isolation because of my age than I do because I'm trans. People look through me. People do not include me. And it is not okay.
We have some work to do as a society to learn how to respect people's privacy and not feel entitled to information about other people's bodies.
You don't identify yourself as an ally. You become an ally when the community identifies you as such.
I often talk about how it's incredibly important for our allies to put in the work to help educate and help to do the advocacy work, because it's a lot to ask us to try to educate everyone. So we really need that help.
I happen to have a story. She was a hairdresser. She earned every penny of the money that she saved for years to get her surgery done. And she was dating a guy she had known very long. And when he found that she was a trans woman, he killed her.
It's really messed up.
We held a name reading ceremony to close out the night, remembering trans, non-binary, and gender-diverse people lost to senseless violence.